Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. The time is 20 minutes past 8, and the name of the show is News and Views. We're going to be having a very interesting conversation coming up with Phillip Dexter, political activist and commentator, and with especially the recent diplomatic tensions between South Africa and the United States having escalated following, Donald Trump's administration's decision to expel South African ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, labeling him as a race baiter. And at the center of the saga is JOEL Pollock, a far-right ideologue and former speechwriter for Tony Leon. Now, a senior editor at Breitbart News, a platform which is quite notorious for its racist, xenophobic, and right-wing propaganda. Pollock is reportedly being considered as the next U.S. ambassador to South Africa, a move that, if confirmed, could see, dare I say, a white supremacist sympathizer influencing diplomatic relations between the two nations. And we ask, who's JOEL Pollock and why is it so important to understand his politics and what he's all about? And we'll be doing that with Phillip Dexter. He's going to be helping us unpack, some of his extremist views and the potential consequences of his appointment if, he's made to be the next U.S. ambassador to South Africa. And Phillip is joining us via our virtual platform. Phillip, thank you so much for joining us here on Salam Media this morning.
Morning.
Really looking forward to this conversation. And appreciate your time again.
Thank you.
I think before we get to JOEL Pollock, with now the dust having seemingly settled, Ibrahim Rasool making his way back to South Africa, what could be a more sober analysis of the current state of affairs, of that decision to expel Ibrahim Rasool from the United States of America, now that we seem to have all the facts and we seem to understand the situation a bit better?
Well, obviously, it was an extraordinary thing that was done by the Trump's administration. I mean, Ibrahim Rasool is a well-known figure. He was the ambassador to the US before. He's a person very professional, commands great respect. So to see him treated in this way has rightfully made a lot of people very angry. And I think it symbolizes the state of the relationship between South Africa and the Trump administration. It's most unfortunate. I think the remarks that he made were taken completely out of context. And Pollock was one of the people who actually edited down the input that Ambassador Rasool had made to the institute, Mapungubwe Institute, which is where he made the remarks. So it was a clear case of right-wing propaganda and, trying to control a narrative to paint a person in a particular way.
And you already touched a bit on JOEL Pollock, and I want to hone in on him a bit. Can you give us a bit of background on Pollock's political history, his affiliations, and how they could have maybe shaped his views and his ideology, particularly when it comes to South Africa and the current state of affairs and the global state of affairs, and South Africa being involved in them?
Well, what we know about Pollock is that he was born in South Africa and immigrated to the US with his parents. He attended university there, then came back to South Africa and attended university for a while here at UCT. Then went back and has had a career on these right-wing platforms, on the radio station, the Hudson Institute, and so on. He also ran as a Republican nominee in Illinois, which he lost that election. But I think it's quite clear he's an extreme right-wing person. As you say, he's a sympathizer with the MAGA white supremacists. He's a Zionist. And, the very idea that he might be the ambassador to South Africa, I find repulsive, and I'm sure many would. I would hope that if his name is put forward, that the president doesn't accept his credentials, because he would be an absolute disaster, holding the views he does. And in fact, the attack he made against South Africa on X, on the X platform, I think is tantamount to treason. He should be charged for the things that he said.
Mm, 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 mm. And another point that I want to touch on, because particularly this year we are seeing a lot of particularly white South Africans, whether it's in movements or it's individuals, going this route, going on this anti-South African, anti-progressive route, where there's so much negative comments made about South Africa, discrediting our government, discrediting the work that has been done since the dawn of democracy, labeling themselves as victims. Is this done by purpose? Is there a greater agenda that sees the rise of people like JOEL Pollock and people like Elon Musk having this sudden interest to a country that they have effectively left? They're no longer South Africans. But it seems this year there's an agenda at play. What can we read into the rise of people like JOEL Pollock and the sudden interest that they've made in South African politics and our relations with the United States?
Well, I think if we really want to, hone down on it, it's all to do with the ICJ case. The case that South Africa brought against Israel. I mean, this has driven right-wing people into an absolute frenzy. And it's really brought the focus of these right-wing people against South Africa. Of course, I think we as South Africans are generally very proud of our government, and really, as far as we're concerned, and as you rightly put in your introduction, to be celebrating a day like Human Rights Day, but while watching genocide on the television. And we're one of the few countries that has stood up and been counted to say this is absolutely wrong. So I think there is an agenda against our country, and certainly an agenda against the ANC. There are obviously within South Africa groups of people, we've had AfriForum and others who are running this agenda locally, because they've never accepted democracy, they've never accepted our constitution, they've never accepted non-racialism. So they've been dead set against it from the get-go, because it meant the end of apartheid. So clearly there's collusion between these right-wing organizations around the world. But their focus is on us, and I think they believe that they can bring about regime change in our country, remove the ANC as a government, or the ANC-led government as it is now, and replace that with a right-wing one. And that's the agenda of Musk, Pollock, all those other IT people. They've openly expressed these views.
Mm, mm, mm. I want to come back to Polak himself, and the work that he does with Breitbart News. We know about them. They're very infamous, for their far right, racist, and xenophobic, Islamophobic narratives. What has been Polak's role in shaping and spreading these views, and how integral has he been in that news agency?
Well, he holds a very senior position. I mean, he's an editor there. He's in charge of the website. So presumably he has a big say in what, the Breitbart News actually spits out. I don't know enough about him personally, in terms of his work there. But, if you look at his track record and his political history, he's absolutely, candidate for Breitbart, spreading disinformation, running these, as you say, xenophobic, Islamophobic attacks. And that would be consistent with his agenda, and his stated views as a Republican Tea Party member, a MAGA person. There's nothing extraordinary about a person like him being at Breitbart.
Mm, mm. And it seems right now his ambitions seem to be being as U.S. ambassador to South Africa. What does the fact that someone like Polak is even considered for an ambassadorship tell us about Trump's administration's approach to South Africa, and how would Pollock appointment impact South Africa-US relations, and most importantly, how should South Africa react to it?
Well, as I said, I think, well, we don't know if he is the nominee or the ambassador, that Trump wants. But I would imagine he would be an ideal candidate for them because he is so right-wing and he holds the views that he does. I think if he were to be appointed ambassador, it would be disastrous for our relations because the previous ambassador, was full of all kinds of nonsense. You remember he accused us of selling weapons to the Russians, something, that was completely untrue. This would be far, far worse than that. And given their stance and what they did to Ambassador Rasool, I would imagine that unless he tones down the rhetoric to a much lower level, he would be somebody who wouldn't last here at all. And the consequences of us expelling an American ambassador, would have big repercussions in terms of the relationship between our two countries. So one would hope that some sanity would prevail. But given what we've seen in the United States of America in recent times, I don't think sanity is something that, is a big feature of the Trump administration or characteristic.
I want us to take a quick break, Phillip, but then when we come back, I want to talk explore a bit on South Africa's reaction. You did mention that if he's indeed, given the ambassadorship to South Africa, it would be something disastrous, and the response to expel him from South Africa would be and not so favorable one for South Africa and our relations with the US. So when we come back, I want to touch a bit on the correct approach, the correct response that Pretoria should and could have regarding our relations with the United States of America from now going forward. But we'll touch on that after this short break.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
For all your gold jewelry requirements, from custom diamond pieces to gold investment coins, there's only one name, Randery Jewelers. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, or stay informed by following us on Instagram and Facebook at Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
More than 800 million people around the world live in deep poverty, uncertain of where the next meal will come from. For those on the brink of starvation, a food pack means survival, dignity, and hope. Send food, send kindness. Be the reason a family does not go hungry. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
Yasin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27 33346 2071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are enduring unimaginable hardships. Ashraful Aid teams are on the ground, delivering crucial aid to those in need. But we can't do it alone. Palestine is suffering and they need your help. Your support can make a world of difference. Visit www.ashrafulaid.org today and donate to bring hope, relief, and healing to those who are in need.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views. The time is 8:35, and the name of the show is News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidir, and we're still having a very, very interesting conversation with our political analyst and activist Phillip Dexter, and we are unpacking JOEL Pollock. He's the man touted as U.S. President Donald Trump's frontrunner to be deployed to lead the embassy of the United States in South Africa. And well, Mr. Pollock is already attracting controversy before he even secures the plush job in Washington. Phillip, thank you so much for staying with us. Really appreciate it. Before we took that short break, I wanted to talk about South Africa's reaction. How can President Cyril Ramaphosa and his office in Pretoria respond to all of this? We know and understand that there must be a certain, show of strength that we need to display. We're still a sovereign country with its own policies. We're a democracy. But people are saying U.S.-South Africa relations benefit us more than they benefit the United States of America, and there must be some sort of restraint when it comes to how we respond to their newly formed agenda against us. How do you respond to this? Should we strike a balance, or there should be some level of arrogance because South Africa itself, we consider ourselves a big player on the African continent and globally, and we almost represent what's right with the global South and what can be right with the global South. Our response to this agenda, what's the best way to go about it?
Well, I think in terms of if the Trump administration were to appoint Pollock as an ambassador, there's very little we could do about that because, every government, every sovereign country has a right to choose their own representatives. Obviously, his behavior would be the most important thing. We'd have to see how he behaved once he was appointed and decide, how to respond to that. So far, the president and the Minister of International Relations have had a very kind of muted and mild response to these events. They've actually asked for example, on Sunday when there's a show of support for Ibrahim Rasool when he returns to the country, for people to show restraint. So I think we, as a country, we have to be level-headed and sensible. I'm not sure that our relationship with the US is more to our advantage than theirs. I mean, I think in terms of trade, both countries benefit. But, South Africa is a sovereign country and it has a very, very good reputation. And in terms of its values and what it stands for on the global stage. So I think we must be proud of that, defend that. And, it doesn't matter how big or small a country is, all countries have to be treated with the same degree of respect in terms of international relations, and we should demand that.
And one thing that, was really obvious or evident about JOEL Pollock and his agenda essentially was the criticism of South Africa's foreign policy, particularly, and I think you've alluded to this already, the ICJ case against Israel, and also BRICS and the ties that we seemingly have with Iran. Again, his potential appointment, do you think it's also a strategic move to kind of pressure, Pretoria into abandoning, its pro-Palestine stance first, and also trying to realign the U.S. geopolitical interests?
Well, I don't think that we can be pressured in that way. So, if his appointment is such an attempt, I'd say it's a pretty futile one to think that an individual could shape our foreign policy. His statements were extraordinary. I mean, about the G20 and, the ICJ and so on. But as I said, we're a sovereign nation, so we have our own policy, we have our own views, and as I said, I'm very proud of the fact that we're supporting those and we're putting those things out there. It is, of course, up to the USA to decide how it responds to that. I don't think that there's globally strong support for the Trump administration's views on many things, including things like international relations, the G20, and the way in which the Trump administration has attacked various institutions. I don't think Europe's very happy about the way they're responding in terms of NATO's responsibilities. So I'm not too concerned about that, and I don't think we should be. As I said, I think our focus must be on our country, our values, our agenda, and we must propagate those to the best of our ability and stand up for those values. If we do anything else, we'd be a Mickey Mouse country, really.
No, definitely. And just in closing, Phillip, what do you think this whole situation tells us about the shifting global political landscape and, dare I say, the resurgence of far-right movements worldwide, but mostly the ones that are aided by Trump 2.0 and his return to the Oval Office?
Well, yeah, there has certainly been, a rise of right-wing and neo-fascist political movements and parties. Some of it, I think, has benefited from the Trump agenda. Some of it is organic to those countries, But at the same time, we must also recognize that there's been a strengthening of a progressive agenda. First of all, as you say, things like BRICS, where we've seen countries in the South leveraging off each other's opportunities and creating a new international platform for trade and investment across the world. We've seen parties of the left winning elections in South America, a little bit in Europe. And certainly, I don't think that countries that have always stood as an alternative, to the US and the US hegemony have been negatively impacted in any significant way, whether it be China, Russia, Iran, all of those sorts of countries. The idea that these few individuals can dictate the world agenda, I think, is just another example of their huge egos. It's one can see, as you've said, some of the individuals and how they behave. They have delusions of grandeur, if nothing else.
I think we're going to live on that note. Phillip, thank you so much for joining us and for this very interesting and eye-opening conversation. And I hope we'll chat again in the not-so-distant future.
Thank you.
There you go. That was Phillip Dexter, entrepreneur and political activist. And yeah, unpacking, I think, quite thoroughly JOEL Pollock, Trump's mouthpiece and a danger to South Africa. Do you think that's the case? Do you think individuals like JOEL Pollock, Elon Musk, organizations like AfriForum and Solidarity, their newfound voice, what do you think that stems for? Why do you think the sudden interest into South Africa's political affairs? Particularly from those that have left our shores, the people that say, well, I don't consider myself even South African anymore. But all of a sudden, there's this, sudden interest. I mean, just look at this tweet from JOEL Pollock. A simple message for South Africa: no trade deals if you support terror at ICJ. No consulate in Johannesburg if you name streets after terrorists. Obviously alluding to Sandton Drive's renaming to Leila Khalid Drive. No investment if you exploit race for expropriation. No Trump at G20 unless you play nice with the West. Well, the United States is not the West. They're just one country in the West. The rest of the West and their leaders will be here in South Africa. So What do you think should be the appropriate response from a South Africa point of view? Do we show slight arrogance? Do we show a bit of restraint? Keep a level head, as I think President Cyril Ramaphosa and his administration have done so well lately. Always calling for calm, always calling for engagement and dialogue with the United States of America, extending that olive branch, if I can put it that way. And I'm not sure why I'm even calling that, because South Africa didn't do anything wrong. So the extension of the proverbial olive branch seems, I don't know, unfair. But yeah, well, what do you think should be the best response? Should we be sticking to our guns? Or we need the United States of America, as a lot of people are alluding to. But other people are saying, well, the relationship we have with the US is also mutually beneficial. It might not be 50-50, but they do benefit from having cordial bilateral relationships with South Africa. And well, we shouldn't be bullied. But other people are saying, hey, we've seen countries that don't play nice with the United States of America and what happens to them. Is South Africa ready to go down that route? Are we willing to risk it all because of our, morals and values and historical connections that we have with Palestine, for instance, and many other countries? I remember there was a speech that Nelson Mandela made, and it was, I think, right after '94, and he was alluding to, I think, bilateral relations with Palestine, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Palestine in Cuba, and at that time there was a whole hoorah and hullabaloo about how the newly formed ANC is, having cordial relationships with these countries that America sees them as enemies. And Nelson Mandela boldly said, the mistake that the West seems to make is to think, and I'm just paraphrasing here, to think that the enemies of the West are enemies of South Africa. And that's not the case. Eh? Cuba, enemy of the US, good friend of South Africa. Palestine, close ally and good friend of South Africa. Russia, good friend of South Africa. These are countries that were supporting our nation during the dark days of apartheid, while the United States of America itself had our political leaders, people like Nelson Mandela, as terrorists. They had them on the terrorist list. I think people like Tokyo Sexwale, for instance, is still on that terrorist list in the United States of America. I think it was only recently, in the mid 2000s, that Nelson Mandela was removed from the United States of America's terrorist list. Something to think about. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.